Hello and a very warm welcome back to English Plus Podcast. I'm your host Danny, and this is our third episode in the Literature and Us theme of the week. Over the last two episodes in our theme for this week, we've talked about the big picture, why literature is a vital human tool, and how all stories are built on universal patterns that we intuitively understand. Today we're zooming in. We're getting practical. We're building a toolkit. I want you to picture a scene. You've just finished a book that you either absolutely loved or intensely disliked. And it happens, of course. You meet up with a friend, or you walk into your book club meeting and someone asks the inevitable question. So, what did you think? And in that moment, your mind goes a little blank. You have a universe of thoughts and feelings about the book, but the words that come out are, well, simple. You may say, oh, it was good. Yeah, I liked it. Or maybe, nah, it wasn't for me. A bit boring. The conversation stalls. It feels like a missed opportunity. You wanted to connect, to share the experience, but you just didn't feel like you had the right language to do it. It's like trying to describe a symphony using only the words loud and quiet. If that scenario feels at all familiar, then this episode is for you. Our goal today is to speak the language of literature. This isn't about learning dry academic jargon to win an argument or sound smart, not at all. This is about equipping you with practical, useful words and phrases to help you unlock the conversations you already want to have. We're going to move beyond simple likes and dislikes and give you the tools to talk confidently about why a book made you feel the way it did. We'll cover genre, theme, character, and style in a way that will empower you for your next book club meeting or even just your next chat about a Netflix show you binged. So, let's open up the toolkit and learn how to talk about stories. I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. Let's start with the first and most basic way we categorize stories: genre. A genre is simply a category of artistic composition, characterized by similarities in form, style, or subject matter. Well, that's the dictionary definition of genre. Now, in simple terms, it's the label that gives us a rough idea of what to expect. When you pick up a book labeled mystery, you expect a crime and a puzzle to solve. When you pick up a romance, you expect a central love story. But talking about genre can be so much more interesting than just stating the obvious. So let's level up our conversation. Let's start with level 1, the basics. Now these are the big, familiar categories. You know them, I know them. A story is either fiction, which means made up, or non-fiction, which means based on facts. Within fiction, you have the major players. We have science fiction, which are speculative stories involving science and technology, often set in the future or on other planets. Think Dune or The Martian. We have fantasy, stories that contain magic, mythical creatures, or supernatural elements that don't exist in our world. Think The Lord of the Rings or A Game of Thrones. We have mystery, a story centered around a crime or a puzzle, which the protagonist must solve, like anything by Agatha Christie. We have thriller, a story designed to keep you on the edge of your seat with high stakes, suspense, and a sense of constant danger. The question isn't who did it, but can the hero stop them in time? Think, for example, The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. We have horror, a story designed to scare you, to evoke feelings of dread, terror, and revulsion. Think, for example, Stephen King's It. We have romance, a story where the central plot revolves around the development of a romantic relationship between two people. Think, for example, Pride and Prejudice. And we have historical fiction, a fictional story set in a recognizable period in the past. Think, for example, Wolf Hall. So far, so good. We've talked about the main genres. Of course, there are a lot more, but these are the main genres that you might come across. But a truly great conversation starts when you dig a little deeper. And that's our level 2, subgenres and specificity. Now, this is where you can add nuance and show you're really engaging with the book. Now, most genres have dozens of subgenres. For example, science fiction isn't just one thing. If a friend asks you about Andy Weir's The Martian, you could say it's a sci-fi novel. That's true. But it's more precise and interesting to say it's a brilliant piece of hard sci-fi. The term hard sci-fi tells your friend that the story is deeply rooted in scientific accuracy and problem solving. It signals that the appeal isn't just aliens and spaceships, but the intellectual thrill of the protagonist using real-world physics and chemistry to survive. Conversely, you could describe Star Wars or the Dune series as a space opera, a subgenre that focuses on epic adventures, large-scale conflicts, and romantic, sweeping drama in a space setting. Or you could talk about cyberpunk, like William Gibson's Neuromancer, which focuses on a high-tech, low-life future of AI and corporate dystopias. The same goes for mystery. Is it a cozy mystery set in a small, charming village with an amateur detective and no graphic violence? Or is it a hard-boiled detective story featuring a cynical, world-weary private investigator navigating a corrupt, gritty city? Using these terms instantly paints a much clearer picture. Now, of course, there's no time to talk about all the subgenres, but that's something you can research and figure out for yourself to sound more accurate and more interesting the next time you talk about a book you read or even a show you watched. And now let's move on to level 3, blurring the lines. Some of the most exciting books being written today don't fit nearly into one box. They are genre bending or cross-genre. Talking about this is a great way to start a discussion. For example, The Time Traveler's Wife is a science fiction novel because it deals with time travel. But at its heart, it's a deeply emotional romance. So you could say, for example, what I found so compelling is how it uses a sci-fi premise to tell a very human love story. It's a great example of a cross-genre novel. Or consider a book like Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's fantasy, yes, but it's written in the style of a 19th century novel by Jane Austen or Charles Dickens. So it's also historical fiction. Pointing this out opens up a whole new line of conversation about style and influence. And now let me equip you with some practical phrases for talking about genre. Now, instead of just saying it's a fantasy book, you can try something like, it's a piece of high fantasy with really intricate world building. Now here, word building is a great term for the creation of a detailed fictional world. Or you can say, for example, it's more of an urban fantasy. The magical elements are set in a modern-day city, which I found really cool. There's a big difference between saying this and just saying it's a fantasy book. All right? Let me give you another example. Instead of saying it was a mix of genres, try something else. Try saying, the author did a great job of blending genres. It had the suspense of a thriller, but also some really thought-provoking sci-fi ideas. Or you can say, I think it really subverts the conventions of a typical romance novel. Now, to subvert conventions means to play with or overturn the reader's expectations of a genre. That's the first part. The first part, we're talking about genre, but that's not everything. We still have the heart of the matter, talking about plot and theme, and that's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now let's talk about the heart of the matter, talking about plot and theme. Well, this is one of the most important distinctions you can make in a book discussion, the difference between plot and theme. Getting this right will instantly elevate your conversation. Now, the plot is what happens. It's the sequence of events. And then this happened, and then this happened. If you're describing the plot of Harry Potter, you'd say, for example, it's about a young orphan who discovers he's a wizard, goes to a magical school, and fights an evil sorcerer who killed his parents. Now, the theme is what the story is about on a deeper level. It's the central idea, the message, or the question the book is exploring. Now, the themes of Harry Potter are things like friendship, courage, the battle between good and evil, prejudice, and the idea that our choices, not our abilities, define who we are. A great discussion often moves from plot to theme. You start with the events and then ask what those events mean. Now, let me give you some useful vocabulary to use when you want to talk about the plot. Let me start with pacing. This refers to the speed at which the story unfolds. Is it a fast-paced page-turner or is it a slow burn? Now, there's no right and wrong answer. It's just a matter of style. Now, how do we use that? For example, we can say, the pacing was relentless. I stayed up all night to finish it. Or you can say, the pacing was very meditative and slow, which really allowed me to sink into the atmosphere of the novel. Alright, so that's about the pacing. Next, let's talk about plot twist. Now, plot twist is a radical, unexpected change in the direction of the story. How do we use that? Well, you can say, I have to admit, that plot twist in the final chapter completely caught me off guard. Did you see it coming? That's plot twist, my friends. Next, let's talk about foreshadowing. Well, this is a literary device where the author gives subtle hints or clues about what is going to happen later in the story. It is often only noticeable on a second reading. You don't notice them. Good foreshadowing doesn't reveal itself on the first reading. So how do we use that? Well, we can say, for example, the author's use of foreshadowing was so clever. All the clues were there from the beginning, but I didn't piece them together. We also have red herring, which is a clue or piece of information that is intended to be misleading or distracting from the real issue. And this is a staple of the mystery genre. You can say, for example, I was convinced that character was the killer, but he turned out to be a complete red herring. So you see, we got these words that you can use, very useful words you can use to talk about the plot. Pacing, plot twist, foreshadowing, red herring. And now let me give you some useful vocabulary to talk about the theme. Identifying the theme is about looking for the recurring ideas in a story. Common themes include coming of age, love and loss, power and corruption, identity, family, justice, and redemption. Now, how do we use those? You can say, for example, for me, the central theme of The Great Gatsby wasn't just love, but the illusion of the past and the corruption of the American dream. And here are some phrases to start a conversation. You can say, for example, what do you think the author was trying to say about the theme of ambition? Or, I thought the book was a fascinating exploration of the theme of memory. So here are some words, phrases you can use to talk about theme. Now, let's bring plot and theme together. The best conversations happen when you connect the two. You can say, for example, the fast-paced, thrilling plot was really just a vehicle to explore the deeper themes of morality and technology. Or you can say, while the plot itself was quite simple, the way it explored the theme of grief was incredibly profound and moving. So, you see, these are just some vocabulary words and phrases we can use to talk about plot and theme. That's not everything. In our next part, we're going to talk about the people on the page. We're going to talk about the characters. And that's very important, maybe the most important part of a book. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Now, for many of us, characters are the most important part of a book. They are the people we connect with. They are the people we root for and sometimes even hate. So how can we talk about them with more precision? Well, let's talk about the character arc, the journey of change. The most important concept here is the character arc. This refers to the internal journey of a character over the course of the story. Now, we've got dynamic characters and we've got static characters. Now, a dynamic character is one who undergoes significant internal change. They learn something, grow as a person, or change their worldview. Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol has one of the most famous character arcs in literature. He goes from a miserly, cruel man to a generous and kind one. Now, I will have to say that most protagonists are dynamic. And then there's the static character. A static character is one who stays essentially the same throughout the story. Well, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, by the way. A static character can serve as a rock or a moral compass for the dynamic protagonist. Now, I'll give you an example about a very famous character and a protagonist, but a static character. Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is largely a static character. It is Dr. Watson and the people around him who are changed by his genius. So let me give you some examples about how we can use that in our conversation. We can say, I found the protagonist's character arc so satisfying. The way she grew from a timid, insecure person into a confident leader was the best part of the book. Or you can say, for example, I was a bit disappointed that the main character felt so static. He didn't seem to learn anything from his experiences. So, my friends, that's about dynamic and static characters and the character arc or the journey of change. Now let's talk about character development. Flat characters versus round characters. Well, this refers to how complex and well-developed a character feels. The terms were coined by the novelist E.M. Forster. A flat character is two-dimensional. They are often defined by a single quality or idea. They can be useful for minor roles, but if a main character is flat, it's usually a flaw in the writing. Think of a stereotypical evil stepmother or bumbling sidekick who has no other personality traits. A round character, on the other hand, is complex and multifaceted, like a real person. They have contradictions, flaws, and a rich inner life. They can surprise you. Hamlet is a round character. Katniss Everdeen is a round character. How do we use that in our conversation? Well, we can say, for example, the villain was a bit flat for my taste. Just pure evil with no real motivation. Or we can say, what made the book so brilliant was how round all the characters were, even the minor ones. They all felt like real people with their own stories. And now let's wrap up our conversation about characters by talking about some useful character terms. There are 3 words that I think you should know about, and this one is the protagonist, antagonist, and anti-hero. Now, the protagonist obviously is the main character of the story. The antagonist is the character or force that opposes the protagonist. And remember, we talked about it, this doesn't have to be a person, right? It could be society, nature, or the protagonist's own inner demons. And there's the anti-hero. And this one is a protagonist who lacks conventional heroic qualities like morality, courage, or idealism. They are often flawed, cynical, and do bad things, but we still root for them. Walter White in Breaking Bad is a classic TV example. So how do we use that? Well, let me give you an example. It was refreshing to read a story with an anti-hero at its center. It really challenged my ideas of right and wrong. So my friends, that's about characters and how we can talk about characters. I hope that was useful, but that's not the end of our episode for today. We still have our part 4, the voice of the story, talking about narrative style and prose. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, the final section might feel the most technical, I know, but it's actually all about something very, very simple. How the story is told. The author's choices about voice, perspective, and language have a huge impact on our experience as readers. Now, let's start with point of view, or the POV. Who's telling the story? Is it a first person, third person limited, third person omniscient? Now, let me start with first person. Now, if the point of view is first person, the narrator is a character in the story, telling it from their perspective using I. This creates a very intimate and personal feel, but it's also limited and can be unreliable. We only know what the narrator knows and thinks. Now, of course, there are a lot of stories that uses first-person point of view, and famous ones are like The Catcher in the Rye or The Hunger Games. How do we use that? We can say, the first-person narration really pulled me into the main character's head. Her voice was so strong and distinctive. So that's about the first person. Now, what about the third-person limited? Now, if the POV is third-person limited, the narrator is outside the story but focuses closely on the thoughts and feelings of one single character, the POV character. This POV uses he or she instead of I, of course, or we, and this is very common, probably the most common POV in all stories. The Harry Potter series is a perfect example. We almost always see the world through Harry's eyes. Now we can say, for example, I think the third-person limited perspective was a smart choice. It created so much suspense because we, the readers, were in the dark right along with the hero. And here, just let me add something that it doesn't have to be only one person. The writer can change the narrator in different chapters as he or she sees fit. So it doesn't always have to be from the eyes of one character or the protagonist or something else. It doesn't have to be the protagonist at all. So this is just to tell you that if we're talking about third-person limited, yes, it's one character at one time, but it can be different characters in different chapters of the story. And it is still called third-person limited. But now let's talk about third-person omniscient. The narrator here is all-knowing. They're outside the story and can tell us what any character is thinking or feeling at any time. Well, this was very popular in 19th century novels like those by George Eliot or Leo Tolstoy. It gives a broad, godlike view of the story. Now we can say, for example, the omniscient narrator allowed the author to explore the whole community, not just one person's story, which was essential for the book's epic scope. And of course, here the choice of the point of view is really important based on what kind of story you want to tell as a writer. So this might be something you want to talk about and whether you think the point of view was appropriate for the story or not. But again, mind you that there are no right or wrong answers. There's no right or wrong POV. It's just the right POV for the right story. This combination worked for me or didn't work for me and why. That's something you can talk about, right? Now, let's move on to talk about the prose, the style of the writing. Now, prose simply means the actual words and sentences on the page. Now, talking about the quality of the writing itself is a great way to discuss a book. Is the prose sparse or minimalist? Using short, direct, unadorned sentences? Ernest Hemingway was famous for this. Is it lyrical or poetic? Using beautiful, rhythmic, and highly descriptive language that reads almost like poetry? Is it dense or ornate? Using complex sentence structures or large vocabulary and intricate detail? Is it controversial, written in a way that feels like someone is talking directly to you? We can say, for example, I wasn't completely sold on the plot, but I fell in love with the author's prose. It was so lyrical and beautiful. Or you can say, the writing style was very sparse, which gave the story a really stark and powerful feeling. And of course, again, there's no right and wrong. There's what you prefer and what works. Now let me move to the final point and talk about the tone and atmosphere. Now these two are related, but a little bit different. Tone is the narrator's attitude toward the subject matter. Is it sarcastic, witty, serious, nostalgic, cynical, or cheerful? Now, the atmosphere or the mood is the feeling the story creates in you, the reader. Is it tense, creepy, magical, melancholic, or comforting? Now, we can say, for example, the narrator's tone was so witty and humorous, which was a great contrast to the dark subject matter. Or we can say, the book had such a chilling and gothic atmosphere. I had to read it with the lights on. So, there you have it, my friends. We've filled our toolkit with practical language to discuss genre, plot, theme, characters, and style. We've learned that you can talk about a novel's genre-bending nature, its slow-burning pacing, its exploration of the theme of identity, its protagonist's compelling character arc, and its sparse, minimalist prose. The purpose of these words is not to make you sound like a literary critic. It's to give you a bridge between your internal experience of a book and your ability to share that experience with others. They are just tools for connection. They allow you to move the conversation from "did you like it" to "what did you think about the way the author did this?" That second question is where the magic happens. That's where you learn what your friend thinks, what you think, and why. So I challenge you to try it out. The next time you finish a book, a movie, or even a TV series, pick one or two of these terms. Think about the protagonist. Were they dynamic or static? Think about the ending. Was it a satisfying conclusion to their character arc? Think about the writing. Was the prose lyrical or conversational? Using this language will not only make your conversations richer, but it will also deepen your own appreciation for the stories you consume. You start to see the craft, the choices the author made, and the incredible architecture that holds a good story together. You already have a love for stories, now you have the language to express it. And that's all for today's episode of English Plus Podcast, my friends. I hope you feel empowered and ready for your next great book discussion. We still have 2 more episodes in our theme for this week, Literature and Us. Tomorrow we'll be talking about a journey through world literature, our global mosaic, and we're going to wrap things up with the last episode of our theme, and this is the story of literature from Gilgamesh to the digital age. But of course, I have to remind you that there are also our Mac Talk episodes and our Thinking Out Loud episode. And they're also following the main theme of this week, which is Literature and Us. So you might check these out as well. And with that being said, that's the end of our episode for today. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you want to support English Plus Podcast, if you want to support me to create more of this content that you love so that everybody else can enjoy that as well, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. And once again, thank you very much for listening to the entire episode. I'll see you again next time. Remember, never stop learning with English Plus Podcast.